Greetings and welcome back to Amunitrek. In this video, we're going to continue with the subject of Abraham's righteous man. In my past two videos, we discussed what Abraham's righteous man would have looked like in Sodom of Genesis 18 if he would have existed. In video 2, we talked about it's not Sodom yet, and we discussed the nature of Sodom, what Sodom looked like, what it would have looked like if there had been righteous there among them. We looked at the reason why there was no righteous among them. So if you get a chance, go back, if you haven't listened to Abraham's righteous man, it's not Sodom yet, go back and check those two videos out. But we're going to continue on that subject today. And today's lesson is, and I borrowed this title from a poem that I will go through here a little bit later on. But today's title, or today's lesson is No Man is an Island. We've discussed in video 1 what the righteous man would have looked like, the things he would have been doing, the actions he would have been taking, the you almost say like the personality. He persevered. He did not tire of doing what was right for the sake of mankind. So in No Man is an Island, we're going to look at the things that a righteous man in Sodom, or a righteous man today, no matter where you live, the things they would not look like, the things that he would not do. We've looked at what he would do. Today we're going to look at what he wouldn't do, so we can grasp these principles for our own life and use these principles to judge ourselves and to, or maybe not necessarily maybe judge ourselves, but to reflect upon ourselves to see where we need work, where we need to become more involved with our communities. This is in line with looking at the verse again in Genesis chapter 18 and verse 23 is the basis. Again, it was the base of the first video, Abraham's righteous man. This would be the base passage also for this lesson. In chapter 18, verse 23 of Genesis, we read, "And Abraham drew near and said, 'Will you also sweep into ruin the righteous along with the wicked?'" Let's pay attention again to the last part of the passage. Will you sweep into ruin the righteous along with the wicked? Now, we've looked at what the righteous person would look like or would do, what his actions would be. Now we're going to look into what that person wouldn't do. And again, I'm using the Rabbi Hirsch Chumash commentary on Genesis. And for a student of the Hebrew Scriptures, I really recommend the Hirsch Chumash and other commentaries by Rabbi Hirsch. He lived in the 1800s. Very explanatory. You can just learn a lot. You can just learn a lot from him and applications for your own life. But now, into his commentary on what this righteous person would not do. The righteous man in Sodom, as visualized by Abraham, and for the sake of the whole community of sinners, is to be saved. I'm going to read that again. The righteous man, or let's say today, the righteous person in Sodom, if he would have existed, as visualized by Abraham, and for whose sake the whole community of sinners is to be saved. We're again taking a look into the life of a righteous person that would have saved Sodom if he had existed, or if that person would have existed. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says that this person does not, in haughtiness and arrogance, abandon the masses. He does not idly look on at the moral ruin of his fellow citizens, nor does he isolate himself within his own walls as to say, what have I to do with others' trouble? For, he says, I, for my part, have saved my own soul, which is another whole lesson. Yes. The Hebrew Scriptures even shows you how to do that, but that's not the subject today. So we'll look at this again. I'm going to break this down. A righteous person, whether in Sodom, L.A., Nashville, Tennessee, New York City, Singapore, Hong Kong, wherever a righteous person would live, anywhere on the earth, they would not be haughty and arrogant as to abandon the masses. The person doesn't just idly, doing nothing, look on at the moral ruin of his fellow citizen. Nor does that person isolate themselves in their four walls of their home and say, what have I to do with others' troubles? For I have saved my own soul. Why get involved? I know what to do is right. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've had that attitude. I've had to repent and ask my Creator to forgive me of my attitude of what's going on in this country. There's some things that has angered me. And I have thought the worst for those who I thought deserved it. I abandoned the masses in my mind, in my thoughts, and in my speech. It's a first reaction. Well, if they want to do that, then, hope this just happens to them. And they may well be deserving of that. But a righteous man doesn't do that. A righteous person doesn't look at what's going on in our nation, the United States, or in the world. We don't look at that, even if it doesn't directly affect us. I've not been directly, personally affected by some of the things. But what I've seen has angered me, and I've had wrong thoughts. A person shouldn't have. I was ready to abandon the masses and hope the worst for them. It says, we don't idly look at the moral ruins of our fellow citizens. We don't isolate ourselves in our own space, our own bubble. Now, that being said, not being in your own bubble, I was raised in a particular denomination that was in a bubble. We were at odds with the rest of the denominations, which happens a lot. We thought we were the only ones right because of what we believed. Oh, that happens a whole lot too. We were not permitted to get involved in our community at certain levels. Like, we were not permitted to be security officers, to be police officers, to join the military. We had a wrong understanding and interpretation of certain passages, as which is the case you'll find with many that separate themselves. We separated ourselves not only from our community, but from our own religion, within our own religion. Right here, we see that a righteous person does not isolate themselves and think they've arrived. They have what it takes to save their own hide, their own soul. This next statement is very strong. It's one, actually, I've been pondering on all week. I've been looking up the definition of a particular word I'll get into here in a minute that's mentioned in this next sentence, to try to understand my place. And I hope you question yourselves with this next statement. We're going to go into it. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and he says, "For if he does act this way, by this very behavior, he excludes himself from the category of the righteous. Since he does not feel, he excludes himself from the righteous. If he does not fulfill the serious responsibility that devolves upon him in his particular environment." Now, this sentence says says several things, but there's two main points to this, what I'm trying to tell you here. I'm going to break it down. If a person becomes so arrogant and haughty that person abandons the masses, idly looks at the moral ruin of his fellow citizens, and questions, and then isolates himself and says to himself, "What have I to do with another person's trouble?" When the righteous person who supposedly doing righteous acts, helping the poor, opening doors, helping a person change tires, just whatever the right way of treating another human being. But when the rubber meets the road, that person does these things. Rabbi Hirsch tells us they exclude themselves from the category of righteous. And he does that because it says he excludes himself from the category of righteous, since he does not fulfill the serious responsibility that devolves upon him in his particular environment. Now, that word devolve, I'm in the South, there's a lot of words that we don't use on an everyday basis. Kind of understand it. I wanted to look up the textbook understanding, and it means a transferred responsibility or duty from, quote, a higher level, like from manager to an employee to an officer to just a say a private or whatever in our, in the military. It's a transference of duty from an upper to a lower level. So I was been thinking and pondering this passage all, or this, not passage, but this sentence all week, questioning, because I was raised in a bubble and not involved with my community other than standard living, making a living, paying my bills, raising my kids, and that is it. We didn't even vote. We were in our bubble. We were isolated, leaving everybody else alone, not getting involved. So I'm like, I don't know anybody who would have transferred a responsibility to me. It goes on. I want you to think about this. But it goes on. It says, in fact, of all the people, this person is least worthy to be one whose sake the community is saved. He who had long abandoned the people to their bitter fate. What does he care about the suffering of the multitude, or the multitudes, plural? The demise of the sinners does not even touch his heart, perhaps even a feeling of satisfaction. He justifies the harsh judgment that falls upon them. This is not the righteous man whose sake of Sodom would have been saved. When we look at this, it answers the question: who transfers the responsibility? And it says here, he does not fulfill the serious responsibility that is transferred upon him. And it says, in his particular environment, where we live. Abandon the masses, idly looks on at the ruin of his fellow citizen, his fellow man, isolates himself, doesn't consider anyone else's troubles his business in a way. He abandons the people to their bitter fate. He cares less about the suffering of the multitudes, nor does the sinner touch his heart. And in a way, he justifies in himself any harsh judgment that falls upon them. Who transfers this serious responsibility upon a person? The community in which that person lives. If you live in a community, you shop at its stores, you drive down its streets, you use its services, you go and you come, you're employed there. You have a responsibility to that community. It's who you have abandoned. It's who you've isolated from. It's who you have figured it's not worth, their troubles are not worth my time. But by the mere fact that you are a citizen of that community, that city, that state, that nation, your responsibility to help your environment comes from your community, not a single person. Each one of us regardless of who we are and where we live, each one of us has a responsibility to step in when needed. When we see moral ruin, we've got to talk to people. When we see someone stealing, I've seen the very act of someone taking something that wasn't theirs, pilfering through somebody's desk at work, and I had to question them. That's not your desk. What are you doing? That's theft. See, we have a response. I mean, we don't have to be out. We're not commanded to go out and proselytize some religious message. We have a responsibility. If we know what is right, we have a responsibility to stand up for that, to help teach that, not only to feed the poor and to clothe the naked and to do charity works and to help the little lady across the street. Yeah, those are responsibilities as well. Those are acts of righteousness. But if you don't do these other things, these responsibilities, then you aren't considered in the category of righteous. Because the deeds that you're doing have become self-serving. But until we learn, including myself, learn to give to our community, ourself, with what we know what to do is right. You don't have to get on the street corner and preach. Just be aware. Be aware of the morality of your community. Be aware of troubles. Seek the Creator. See where you might be able to help out. Maybe you can't do anything, but maybe you can help someone else that you do know that has the means to do something. But we've got to learn to be active. Every one of us needs to learn to be active in our community for what is right and moral. Standing by, it has irritated the dickens out of me that so many rioters in this world is allowed to destroy someone else's building, someone else's property, someone else's livelihood. It's theft. It's robbery. It's the sins of the flood. Read it. The flood wasn't over religion. It was over theft and robbery and violence. And those of us who know this, we've got to learn somehow, some way, including myself, to stand up for what is right if we're going to save our communities. If we don't, then our cities, our communities, our nations will be brought down to ruin because we decided to isolate ourselves. We decided to abandon the masses. And I'm going to read you this poem. No man is an island. That's a saying a lot of people know, but maybe they don't know the poem. So I went to Rabbi Google, found it, copied it off. Just an inside joke with a lot of us Hebrew scripture students. We call it Rabbi Google. Excuse me. No Man is an Island by John Donne. He was a metaphysical poet who lived in the 15 and 1600s. He himself saw that man was not an island. He goes, no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod of dirt, be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. Insert your country. United States, the Philippines, Russia, Thailand, Hong Kong, Japan, Brazil, the Caribbean islands, wherever you are living, wherever you're hearing my voice, every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, enter your place is less. My country, the United States, is less. My state of Tennessee is less. My county within the state of Tennessee is less. My city in which I live in is less. As well as the premonitory were, as well as the manner of your friends or your own, where a man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls, for it tolls for thee, tolls for you. This is important. It says, if a clod was to be washed away, Europe is the less, as well as any member of your friends or your own family were washed away. Any man's death diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. And therefore never sin to know whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. If I had to put it in modern words, what that last one says, never sin to know for whom the bell tolls, is like, let's let somebody else fix the problem. No, the bell tolls for you. You're to fix the problem. Somehow you have a part. You're a piece of the puzzle of fixing the problem. There's, I'm going to tell a story by memory. I may not get it exactly right. It's been a while since I've heard it. It's one of my favorites that I learned in my studies of the Hebrew Scriptures and of the traditions of Israel. It's a very, very important story. It goes right along with what I just read. I hadn't planned on telling this. It just came to mind. There were two men that were hired. Each man was given a shovel and a pail. And the king said, go over there and move that mountain. And so they went to dig, filling their pails with dirt and dumping the dirt somewhere else on the mountain. One looked at the size of the mountain and he says, this mountain's too big. There's no way I'm going to move this mountain. This is crazy. There's no way I am going to move this mountain with this shovel and this pail. He throws the shovel and the pail down and leaves. Second man's looking at the mountain. He heard the man before, he just left. He turns to the mountain and begins to dig. He says to himself, it's not maybe my job to complete this task, but I'm getting paid to do the task. He was doing his part. So see, the king was probably going to send other people to move the mountain. But we all have our own part to play in moving the mountain. Sometimes these mountains in our societies, our communities, our nations, our Our cities are they're huge. We're not the one who's to probably fix the whole problem, but we may be part of the equation. And it's not our responsibility to remove ourselves from the equation. We are not to isolate ourselves. We're to do what we can do. There's just so many other examples I could share with you to get the point across. But abandoning the masses, idly looking on at the ruin of his fellow citizen, his fellow neighbor, isolating yourself, saying, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do and ignore everybody else, and I'm going to live my life by myself. Not caring about anybody else's troubles. This is not the righteous man whose sake Sodom would have been saved, because there was no person like this. Sodom is no more. Let that sink in. Like I said in my first video, or first lesson on this, Abraham's righteous man, it says he never ceases to admonish, teaching, objecting, warning, rectifying, doing everything he can do. But because there was not a person who would look upon his neighbors with a concerned heart and spirit and do what it would take to help his own community, Sodom is no more. Sodom is no more because not one person. One person. Will you be the person that will either help save your city from moral ruin, or will you be the cause of the ruin of your city by doing nothing? You see, I grew up in a bubble. Over the last few years, myself, I've been learning to come out of that bubble. I don't know what to do, where to look. I'm just doing what I can do. This video is a step in that direction. To admonish others, don't be what causes the ruin of your community. Be the person that's in the equation of saving that city. We're not talking about religion. Please, we're not talking about religion. When the Hebrew scriptures talk about being saved, it's from physical calamity. And that's the Creator wants us to live by his attributes and create a moral, a harmonious, and peaceful existence on this earth. We don't have that. We have people who worship all kinds of gods like money, greed, power, control. None of these men, women, people, and whatever country, color, race, nation you are, none of that saves the community. Because what it says here, again at the beginning, the righteous man in Sodom is visualized by Abraham, for whose sake the whole community of sinners is to be saved, does not in a haughtiness or arrogant way abandon the masses. He's not haughty and arrogant. That leads you away. To save our communities, we need people to be humble and recognizing that we need help, our communities need help, and we're part of the answer. I hope that whoever listens to these lessons, these last three lessons, Abraham's righteous man, it's not Sodom yet, and no man is an island. I hope you never look at Genesis 18 the same again. There is a powerful, powerful message for every one of us that is there. It's not a Sunday school lesson. It's not a jump and shout lesson from the pulpit on Sunday night. It is a lesson, a human lesson, that the Creator saved for us so that Israel would have it written down by Moses and carried through these 3,400 years of recording this message down to us today in the 21st century, so we can learn to live as humans, and we can see what would save a city and what will destroy a city based on the people who lives there's actions and behavior. I am proud to be a part of a group of people around this planet that is waking up to human behavioral issues, that the Creator gave us 7 basic guidelines. They're categorical. They run deep as the ocean. But there's 7 basic guidelines for humanity. And I'm glad, and I'm honored to be among those that can help spread this word to our communities, to show you these things in these stories that you've heard all your life, but you didn't see its message. I didn't see its message. It's been a time as this that the Creator has saw fit for me to look into Genesis 18. I've been in the book of Genesis now since, I'm going to say, about 5 or 6 years, somewhere in there maybe. I've been probably going back further than that, in the book of Genesis, because there's so much there that we've read his stories, we've read his history, but we have not learned its lesson. Please don't look at Genesis 18 again on this question that Abraham asked the Creator. Would you wash away? Will you wipe out the righteous with the wicked? And yes, standing there that day, the opportunity for a person to be the right kind of person, to be labeled as righteous, was attainable. But it takes a personal choice. Is that what you want? Do you want to be a person that brings ruin to your city, or do you want to be a person that saves your city? And that's the question. I want to thank you again for tuning in to Amuna Trek. This has been an emotional 3-part lesson. I didn't set up for it to be a 3-part lesson, but it's what it turned out to be. It's been an emotional one for me. It's been an eye-opener for me. I took steps today to try to start another step outside the bubble toward my fellow citizens where I live. And I encourage each and every one of you to do the same. I've got a friend of mine. His name's Scotty Helton. Like I said, if you're watching, if you haven't, go over to Sacred Odyssey Videocast here on YouTube. Check us out. We're starting a YouTube channel. We have a lot of people, pastors and other people, teachers and things, that sends us questions, and we delve into what the Hebrew Scripture teaches. And we've started. We've just got a couple of videos up. We've got another one recorded. Just got to finish editing and all that and get it on. We've already got another question that we're going to be delving into here in the future. It's going to be very touchy. But yeah, my friend Scotty Helton, look him up on Facebook. He lives about an hour and a half north of me. I'm in Southeast Tennessee. He's kind of in the Middle East, not Middle East, I guess Middle East, Tennessee. But he lives up toward the middle part of the eastern part of our state. Let me put it that way. He'd probably like to go to Middle East, Israel. I know he's got a heart for that part of the world as well. Look up his Facebook page, Scotty Helton. He's been doing a series of about 3 to 6 minute videos on charity. And something he's very emotionally and passionate about. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. The things he talks about in these little bit videos. Look and see what a person is doing to help save his environment, his city, his community he lives in. He's a great example. I really recommend these little videos on charity that he's doing. It'll touch your heart. It will touch your heart. And I really recommend those. But for now, I want to thank you all again for tuning in. If this is lessons helped you in any way, please like my videos, share my videos, subscribe, invite other people to subscribe to Amuna Trek, and also over at Sacred Odyssey Videocast, where we're going to be doing some, where we're doing teachings, answering questions. But this has been an emotional part for me to do these lessons, and I want to thank you for taking time. I know the last two's been a little longer, but thank you for taking time. Get involved. You are not an island. You're connected to your neighbor. You're connected to me. And know that at the death of any person, we're less of a people. We're less of a human race when one slips out. We need to have that mindset when we look at people, to know that life is important, so important that the Creator put them here at this time. Good afternoon and have a great week. Bye-bye.